Okay. Hello, everyone. We're happy that so many of you have joined us today for our expert text recognition model training webinar. Today, we will have a deeper look into training text recognition models in Transkribus together with my colleagues. I will try to give you a good overview how you can train text recognition models also with advanced settings so you can bring Transkribus to the full potential. A brief overview of today's webinar. I will briefly give you an introduction of the topic today, and then we will already dive deep into the advanced settings of Transkribus. We will also have a quick look at right to left scripts, so which is also a frequently demanded topic. So how to handle right to left scripts with Transkribus. We will also have a look at multiple different script types and languages in one model, how you can handle that. We will finally have a look at retraining a model, so how you can have different versions of your model reiterate through the process of your model training. And finally, we have room for Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat. You can always type any questions that you might have into the chat, and we will do our best to directly answer them on the fly during our presentation. But also we have time, as said, at the end of the webinar to have a closer look at the questions and then also answer them in more detail. So who's here today with me? First, we have Sarah from our user success team, or customer success team. Actually, we forgot to change the description here. So Sarah is one of our customer success managers together with Johannes. It's basically our strong team that is bringing everyone in using Transkribus to their full success. So great experience with using Transkribus, both of you. It's great to have you here. We also have Helene with us today, who is from our comms team, who's managing and running all the communications here at Transkribus. It's also great to have you here. And it's finally me. I'm Flo. I'm part of the board of directors here at Transkribus, mainly working on operations and the product. Before we start, we have prepared a little survey. It's a very quick one, just to warm up a little bit, to get some impressions from your end. I've now started the survey, which you should see on your screens. But we just wanted to ask two questions. So one is, how many models have you trained so far, to get a feel how advanced you are in training models with Transkribus, and also what your biggest pain point or challenge when working with Transkribus is. So this will also help us to understand your level of experience with Transkribus. As I see, there's some of us here that have trained more than 10 models, which is great. So maybe then you can share some insights with us, because we are also constantly learning and gaining new insights as we work with our tool ourselves. Because there's a saying, there's no one in the team who knows every feature of Transkribus. So we are really broad platform where you can do many and very versatile things. So it might be all the case that you have discovered some insights that are providing good results, and everybody else can also benefit from these insights. Oh, let's just briefly wait for you to type in your answers. It's also great to see that 7 people, I can see the results already. 7 of you have trained more than 10 models, so that's really great. So you're very experienced, but also others have more than 5, more than 2. There's also a good portion that have not trained the model yet. So today will be maybe a little bit of a crash course, because we're really having a look at deeper insights, but still these will also be very valuable. And based on the last week's webinar, you will obviously, that you can still watch on YouTube, then be able to train your own text model with both of these webinars. So we try to keep them short and sweet, so 45 minutes each, to give you a good overview. So if many of you, I think we're at a very good level. Maybe 58 of you have already answered the survey. I think this gives now we're at 60, so maybe some of you are still typing. Let's just give it go. I will leave it open for maybe another minute, and in the meantime continue with the slides. because these insights are also very helpful for us. Just a very brief recap. So what is Transkribus? As we always like to say, that we are an ally. We help to work with historical documents. We're a platform that provide tools to work with historical documents. But the fun part is then in your court, you're the ones that are working with the material, and you're the experts with the material. We are maybe the experts with the tools, but yeah, working with the material is something that you are spending way more time than we might do. When you work with Transkribus, there are basically two main approaches. We also went through that last time. You can use public models or ready-to-use models. They are large and robust. So sometimes they have already incorporated multiple languages. They are easy to use, handwritten and printed. But it might still happen that you have a corpus that is not working well with public models, where you have very specific criteria that need to be part of your recognition results, or you have different approaches to working with the material, different annotation conventions, etc. Once that is the case, you might opt for a custom model, so training your own model with Transkribus. They might deliver higher accuracy because you can really tailor them to your material. So your material will be recognized exactly with that model as you have trained it to do so. Like this, they're also more adaptable, so they can be adapted to your material, and you have full control what goes into the model, because the model virtually really just learns that material that you use as training data for that model. And it can be fine-tuned to your product. As said, if you have specific conventions for your annotation style, for instance, or abbreviations or different text that you might want to train into the model, you can do so with a custom model. So we go from a very broad public model like the text type and a super model. And we also have prepared something, nice, good news at the end of this webinar regarding supermodels. So stay with us, and we will have some great news to share. But from a supermodel, from a public model that you might use with Transkribus, you can go to your first, more basic model, starter model, where you maybe train your first 20 pages, as we tried to explain last week with the beginner webinar. But then eventually, and that's what we mainly focus today, you might do some advanced research. You might train multiple model iterations. You might need to fine tune your model. You might to rework your training data to get the greatest results or the ideal results for your project. And that's where some custom settings come into play. Just to remind, today we are looking at text recognition models. In Transkribus, you can have multiple different model types, as you can see here. You can train models for text recognition, but also for lines recognition, baseline recognition. That's one of the trickiest parts of working with Transkribus, getting the layout out first. And that's also a base function for you to understand that when your model might not do very well, your text model very often it's the step before, so recognizing the lines that is not working properly. We will also have a dedicated webinar on that in the future. I don't know the exact date. I think it's next year, beginning of next year, if I recall correctly. Then we will have a closer look at baselines, because they are very crucial for your results. And also for text regions, we have field and table models where you can do information extraction, where you can label your material from a layout perspective, so structured layout information that you can train models on. We basically have a simple workflow that you need to run through when you train your model. You need to prepare training data. That means sometimes you pre-recognize it with a public model or with your first model version, then correct it, save it as ground truth, and start the training again. So that's the very simple workflow we will go through. Today we will have a close look at the steps when it comes to training the model, but also for ground truth creation and specifics about training data. So without further ado, I would hand over to my colleague Sarah, who's the very expert. I think Sarah has done more trainings than most of us. So Sarah, let us know what you have on your slides regarding advanced settings.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to share my screen. Let's jump right into the platform. We are here. You already have your ground router. So let's assume that you have created your ground router, which means that there is the image and the text. And now we want to train the model using some advanced settings. So first, we select the documents that we want to train the model on. In this case, let's say that we want to train a model on Latin manuscripts. So we select our documents with the ground router, and we go to train, and we click on text recognition model. Automatically, those pages are assigned to the training data. The training data is the pages that the model looks during the training and the pages on which the model learned how to transcribe the text. The next step is to select the validation data. The validation data are pages that on which the model isn't trained, but they are set aside for evaluation. So at every training cycle, the model runs for 100 training cycles. At every cycle, first the model learns on the training data. Then it evaluates itself, trying to recognize the pages in the validation data. And this cycle is repeated multiple times until the model has learned everything that it can learn on this type of data. You can manually select the validation data, but we recommend to use the automatic selection and to leave the validation, the percentage to 10%. This is important because it's important to have a varied validation data, and that in the validation data there are all the examples of your ground router, so different type of script, different languages. If your validation data is not enough varied, the risk is that the model doesn't perform as it should be, or that the character error rate you see in the end is too high or too low, and it's not the real performance of the model. And then we go here, and you have to add the details as it was explained last week in the previous webinar. And let's go now to the advanced setting. The first setting that you can select here is the base model. What is a base model? You can train your model from scratch, and in this case you are training a model without a base model, or you can let's say build your model on the top of another model. In this way, your model will inherit the knowledge of the previous model and start the training from the starting point of the previous model. What is important here to make the base model effective is to select a base model trained on similar writings and languages. So I'm training a model on Latin. I go here and I want to select a base model. I can filter all the public models can be selected as base model, except certain models, and I will talk about it in a bit, but you can select the public models or your private models. So let's filter it by Latin. I can select, for example, this Transkribus Print M1, which is a very general model trained on various languages, included Latin, but this model is trained on printed material, so it doesn't make sense because it wouldn't help my model to perform better. I need to choose a model trained on similar text and similar scripts and similar material. So, for example, maybe this one could be good. It depends on the century of my documents. This is not a good choice because there is both Javanese and Latin, and I have only Latin. So you have to search for a model that is suitable for your documents, and in case also read the description to better understand which scripts have been included in this model. Like here, medieval script, but which are the scripts included and from which regions and so on. But it's better to use a very general model as base model instead of a very small model. For example, I wouldn't choose, for example, this model right here, because it's a very good model in terms of character error rate, but it's trained on a specific handwriting, so on just on one hand. Well, in my case, I want to have a more general model as a base model. So probably I would choose this one, medieval scripts, or another Latin model. What is not possible to select is a supermodel. So if you see, probably you have tested the supermodels and like the Text Titan. They are very good to get the first transcription and to start and correct this transcription to create your ground truth. Unfortunately, they cannot be selected as a base model because the technology behind is different from the models that we can train inside of the platform. So this is not a bug, so it's not a bug that you are not allowed to select the supermodel. It's just that it's not possible to select it. So be aware of that. And for example, if you're working with German, instead of the Text Titan, you can select the German Giant. In the case of English, you can select the English Eagle and so on. So let's select the model. And then we go to the other advanced options. Here we have the training cycles. This indicates the maximum numbers of times that the model will go through the training data and the validation data. So your model will be trained maximum 100 cycles. So this is a good number if you're training a small or middle-size model. So for the first training, it's not necessary to increase the training cycle. It makes sense to increase it if you're training very big models. And then we have the early stopping. This is the number of training cycles that are the minimum number of training cycles. So at least your model will be trained 20 training cycles. So this because when the model isn't learning anything new at some point, so the curve isn't going further down, automatically the model Transkribus stops the training. With the early stopping set to 20, it means that at least 20 cycles are trained, and the maximum number is 100 cycles. But for the first training, or usually these are enough. You don't need to change those values. Then we have the reverse text. We will talk about it later. This is useful when you are working with right-to-left scripts. You can select this option, use existing line polygons for training. Select this option only if you have manually adjusted the line polygons. So for example, if you're working with very large letters, in the case of newspapers, if the normal polygons don't cover all the title, the letters in the titles, and you have adjusted them manually, you can flag this option, and during the training, the polygons won't be automatically computed, but Transkribus will use the polygons that you have manually corrected. You just have to pay attention that you have to correct all the polygons on the page, not just the polygon of the big letters, but all the polygons. Here, you can also train train the abbreviation with the expansion, and we will see it in a minute. And here you can omit the lines containing the tag unclear or gap. When you create a grant root, it could happen that you're not sure about a word, or there is a damage on the paper, so you cannot read what is written, and you can add the unclear tag or the gap tag. And then you can, during the training, you can say to Transkribus that you don't want those lines to be included. Just pay attention here that you are not, Transkribus won't select the entire line, not just the tagged word, because the training happens at the line level. So if there is a word tagged as unclear or gap, the entire line won't be considered. So let's imagine that you have your training, in your validation data, there are 100 lines, and 80 of them contain a tagged word. It means that Transkribus will just train the model on 20 lines. So use it carefully, because if you use it too much, if you use those tags too much, it means that you will end without training data. And then you can, you have to select the language here. And when everything is ready, and also add the description, the model, that you can go to the recap page and start your training. Let's now go back to the slides to see what you can do with the abbreviations. There are various options on how to treat abbreviations. It really depends on your project and what you want as the final output. The first option is to keep the abbreviated form in your transcript, and you have simply to transcribe the abbreviation as they appear in the document. Here it's up to you which special characters you want to use. But you can use the characters that are more similar to the ones on the image. For example, here you see this is in Latin, cogitato, consiglio, facit. Instead, here this reverted C stands for con, but has been transcribe exactly as it is in the image. So here we have the perfect correspondence between the characters in the image and the characters in our transcription. This is good. You can train a model in this way, and the output that you will get in the end is the same as your grant root. So the model will learn to add the abbreviations, transcribe the abbreviation as they are. So just the character corresponding to that abbreviation. The second option is to transcribe the expanded form in the grant root. Neural networks are able to learn to recognize and use expansions, especially if they appear frequently. So you can write the expansion of the abbreviation in your grant root text. You just need to pay attention to be consistent. So, for example, here we have GRA with this line above the A. This word has been transcribed as grazia, and the grant root contains the expansion and not what we actually see on the image. Because these abbreviations are very frequent and they always are expanded in the same way, the model learns to do that. So you can train a model to automatically expand the abbreviation. The other thing to note is that in the end, you don't know that this originally was an abbreviation. You just get the transcribed expanded text. But this option is very good if you want just to search it for your text, because the text in this way becomes more searchable. And then we have the last option where you can train as abbreviations and with expansion. So you have to tag the abbreviations with the abbrev tag and write the expansion in the property of the tag. Like for example here, with the line above the U is expanded as and during the training, you can select the option train abbreviations include the expansion, and the model will do the same during the recognition. So the model will recognize the text as it appears in the image and automatically tag with the abbreviation tag the abbreviation and include the expansion in the tag property. The model is capable to learn to tag the words, tag the abbreviations, and include and add the expansion, but it works well only when the abbreviations are very frequent. So if an abbreviation appears only once or twice, it's very difficult that the model will learn to recognize it. If you have the same abbreviation that appears 20, 50 20 or 30 times in your ground truth, the model will be stronger in recognizing and tagging abbreviations. Now that when you have trained your model, how to evaluate that, the model and its performance, the character error rate is the measure to evaluate the performance of the model, and it indicates the percentage of characters that have been transcribed incorrectly by the text recognition model. So in this case, a character error rate of 5.20% indicates that only 5 out of 100 characters were incorrectly recognized by the automatic text recognition. A good character error rate in the case of printed text is between 0.5 and 2%, and for unwritten text, a good character error rate is between 2 and 8%, and it really depends on the number of hands and the difficulty of the script. In general, if the character error rate is below 10%, the model can be considered efficient, and transcribing it automatically is more efficient than transcribing it manually. What you can also look at is the learning curve. So you can see it within Transkribus. The x-axis indicate the training cycles, so how many. Here we have the training cycles, and the y-axis is the character error rate. So you can see here that the curve goes down while the training cycles are progressing. So this is a very good learning curve. You have both learning curves, one for the training set or training data, and one for the validation data. What is important is that the learning curves are close one to each other and converge at the end. I also have some example of some very odd or strange learning curves. So if you see something similar, it means that something went wrong. So in this case, the learning curve of the training data is very good, but we see that the one of the validation data remains quite high. Probably here, in this case, the model wasn't able to generalize, so it means that it learns too well to recognize the pages of the training data, but then is not able to recognize new pages like the ones that it sees in the validation data. And here we have another very strange learning curve. And also in this case, I think the problem is too few pages in the validation data. Remember always that the character error rate and the learning curve are some measure, but they don't capture the entire model performance. So it's very important also to test your models and visually evaluate the results. Here I have 2 examples that I wanted to show you. These are the exact same models trained on English text. The training data was 149 pages. I trained this model without the base model, and the character error rate is 7.18%. And here I have the same model trained with a base model, and the accuracy is the correct error rate is 5.86%. So the correct error rate dropped by more than 1 percentage point just using a base model, and in most of the cases the base model helps to get better results. And here we have a model trying to solve the abbreviations. So if you want to look at it, is a public model called UCL University of Toronto 7. You can test it, and yeah, you will see that automatically the model solves the abbreviations. So here, for example, this word has been transcribed in the abbreviated form, in the expanded form as sancti. Okay, let's talk briefly about right to left scripts. As we know, there are some languages are right to left, and they require extra attention for training models. At the moment, the editor supports the Transkribus editor supports only left to right text. So we have to find some workarounds to work with right to left script, but it's possible, and there are models trained on right to left scripts. What you have to do when you create the ground truth, first you have to run the layout recognition. As with left to right scripts, you have first to identify the text regions and the lines of text, and you can do it automatically with the automatic layout recognition. And then you have two options. The first option is to transcribe the text from left to right in the editor. So you will have in the image the text right to left, and in the editor left to right. When you train the model, in the advanced setting, you have to flag this option, reverse text, to let Transkribus know that the text has been transcribed in the opposite direction of the image. So you have to flag this option. The output will be the same that as you have in your ground truth. So the output will be left to right. The other option is to use an external editor that supports right to left input and transcribe your text there. Then you can copy the text and paste it within Transkribus. And as you see here, now the reading order, the reading of the words and letters is correct. So we don't need to select the reverse text flag, because the text is right to left, both in the text, in the text editor and in the image. And if you train your model in this way, the output will be right to left. So there are the two main options, and it depends how you prefer to work and what you prefer to have as an output. There are some existing public models trained on right to left scripts. Here you have a screenshot of them, so you can go to and test them. Some are from printed material and others from handwritten material. But the correct error rate is quite good. And there's also a community of users working with right to left scripts. So if you are interested in that, we can also put you in contact with them. You can send us a message in the chat, and we will do that. Okay, now I'll leave the floor to Helene.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen real quick. And there we go. Okay, so we often get questions about training a model for multiple scripts or multiple languages, and let's have a look at when that is necessary. So when you should or can train a model for multiple scripts and languages. So the first is, of course, if your document contains more than one language, such as a manuscript that is bilingual or even more, has 3 languages in there. But mostly this is necessary if you have materials that have different scripts. So for example, that combine different scripts, or that have multiple hands in there, or for example, if a text switches between scripts mid-document. So what is important for the model is that it sees all the different scripts during training. So if you work with documents that have different scripts or different hands, then it's necessary to include all this data or all these pages with ground truth in the training data. So here we have, again, the training workflow. And what you have to consider here is that, again, with different scripts, different hands, you probably have to include more training data because it is more diverse. So here we do recommend around 100 to 150 pages of training data for a good start for your first model. So again, the training data should really accurately represent the languages and especially the scripts that the model is being trained for. And to do that, you include a substantial number of samples or of ground truth pages for each language and especially for each script to achieve this consistency across all the different types of scripts and hands. So for training data estimates, again, it depends a bit on how many different scripts or hands you have. So if you have one single hand with simple writing, it's enough if you start out with around 50 pages of training data of ground truth. If you have several hands and include them all in the training, around 150 pages. If you have many hands from the same region, but they're not all seen during training, we do recommend even more pages. So this is some reference that you can look at. The benefits that you have from using such diverse training data in the training is that the exposure to these multiple handwriting styles can improve the model flexibility, especially, of course, for historical text, and it can support the consistency as well of the documents. So it can handle documents better that combine printed and handwritten text, and it can handle documents better that have, again, different hands, for example. We also have some data for evaluation. So as my colleague Sarah mentioned before, the character error rate is something that you can have a look at to kind of estimate how well the model will perform. So here there are some estimates for, again, a single hand error rate of 2 to 4% is quite good and is recommended. If you have many hands or more hands, then around 6 to 8% is a good model. But again, if it's under 10%, then it's really a model that you can work with quite well. Here is an example that we have for a model with different scripts. It's Irish, Gaelic, and Roman type, and it's one of the public models. I can also show you one other model that we have, or maybe let's have a look here into the platform. So yes, let me first show you what kind of documents you might be working with that you want to train a model for multiple scripts and languages. So here we have a very diverse set of documents or of pages. And as you can see, when we scroll down here, these are pages that are very mixed material. So let's open one page. And as you can see, we have here typewritten. We have here typewritten text and also some comments on the side. But if we go further, we even have some pages that are mostly handwritten. So we have here again typewritten print as well as handwritten documents. So here it's important again to really add these pages as ground truth into the training data so that your model really sees the diverse set of documents, of scripts that you're working with. One example that we can show you of public models that worked with different scripts. Let's see, maybe you're looking for a model. I think we have an Italian one that I can show you. This one, for example. This one is a model from one of our colleagues, and she trained a model for different scripts and languages, as you can see here, Italian, Greek, and Latin. And as you can see with Greek and Latin, of course, there are two different scripts that are being used. And with Italian and Latin, there are also two languages that are being represented in the different scripts. So this is one example of when it's necessary and helpful to train a model for different scripts. You can also have a look at this model. The description really gives a good indication of what type of material was used for the training and what type of scripts have been entered for the training. So this is an overview of what to do when you want to work with a model and want to train a model for various scripts. And now we'll have a look at retraining and improving a model. And this is necessary when you have trained your first model. And as Sarah also mentioned before, only looking at the CER is a good indicator, but you always have to test the model and see if it works well. So again, if the character error rate is consistently high and over 10%, we do recommend to retrain a new model. And of course, if the performance isn't that well, if you're not happy with the performance. It's also recommended to retrain a model and train a new model if you want to add more documents. For example, again, if you want to add more pages with a different script or a different hand that weren't in the original training data, it's also recommended. And if you just want to add a significant amount of added ground truth, then it's recommended to retrain a model. How do you retrain a model? So we already have had a look at the basic steps of how to train a model, also last week in the basic webinar. And so let's say you have your first model, the model version 1, let's say. And when you have tried out the model and you've corrected those pages again and saved more pages as ground truth, then you can start a new training to have a second model. And then you can again recognize more pages with the new and improved model and start the retraining cycle again. So let's see. Yes. So again, if you have illegible or unfamiliar handwriting, of course, you have a lower accuracy. And when you retrain a model, already doubling the training data, so around a 20 or 25 decrease of an error rate can happen only by doubling the training data. So let's say you start with 20 pages of ground truth for your first model, and you add another 20 pages for your second model, the CER can already decrease by 20 to 25%. And again, here you can also add a base model that Sarah explained before. What is important to note here is that you should really select a relevant public model at a base model. Do not select the previous model, so the custom model. This can decrease the accuracy again. So really, as Sarah showed before, select a relevant public model as a base model. And then you add the newly recognized pages to the existing ground truth and train the new model. One thing that we should also mention here, this is a common misconception. If you correct the transcriptions in the document editor, this does not improve the model. The accuracy of the model and the model itself increases only by retraining or training a new model version with the updated ground truth. And this is a quite normal part of the process. We've also showed some examples before, and they were all numbered, number 3, number 7. So this is a very common process, very normal part of the process. So keep refining, keep working on improved models, and soon you'll have a model that will be satisfactory. So let's have a look at how you can add new ground truth data. So let's go to the model page. Since I'm already in the models workspace, we'll select train new model, click on text recognition model again, and now we can select our training data. So we now have our different sets of ground truth. So this is just to show that, just as an example, this is the first set of ground truth. And we added more ground truth to create a better model. And we just simply put that in a different and in a second document. So we add this additional ground truth data and select it for the model training. And then we can go to next, and basically we go through the same steps as with a normal model training, but just to show you that you can add the existing ground truth data to the added ground truth data, and that's how you train an improved model. And that can really make a difference. We've seen it before as well, but let me show you the difference with models that we train ourselves. So if you attended last week's webinar, maybe you remember we started a model training, and you can see here the difference that the amount of ground truth and the quality of the ground truth data can make. So with the first version of our Marjorie diary model, we only used 19 pages of ground truth, and maybe there were some errors in there, and we trained a model, and the CR is almost 40%. And then we had another model, or we created another model with over 140, almost 150 pages of accurate ground truth. And you can see here with this added ground truth, so these 19 pages plus even more, we already have a CR of under 10%. So you can really see what difference it makes to have more ground truth data and what it means to retrain a model and improve a model and how much better it can be. Are there any questions so far that we should answer here, Flo or Sarah, from the chat?
I think
Or
we're on a
everything?
good level. There are some
All right.
questions regarding quality of the material, but that's something that we can then talk about at the end of the
Okay.
webinar.
Yeah, sounds good. Then I would hand over to you. I think I have explained all my slides for retraining a model, and I'll hand over here.
Yeah, let me briefly open my screen. Perfect. Alrighty, let's come to a quick wrap up. Really quick, we're overrunning a little bit, but we will also stay here a little bit longer to answer your questions. Yeah, first, to come back to the beginning, Transkribus is your AI-powered ally. But there's a little bit more behind Transkribus. We're a cooperative, as you might have heard last week. And as this cooperative, our main and sole purpose is to run and further develop Transkribus. We have more than 200 members, actually close to 230 members around the globe, a lot of universities, but also private individuals who support basically the further development of Transkribus, and they're basically co-owners of the Transkribus platform with the Read cooperative. You can also see our family photo. We have a user conference every 1.5 years. The next one will likely be in fall 2025. And it's always nice to take these family photos. To sustain everything, we also need to have a business model, as we are a cooperative with no shareholder payouts. So we're basically acting like an NGO, like a non-profit organization, but still need to be profitable. So we need to sustain the development of the platform. For that, we have a subscription model. We have different tiers. So we have tried to tailor these tiers really to the different usage scenarios for Transkribus. There are more advanced usage scenarios. There are usage scenarios where you are working on private projects, but also free ones. So we're really providing a free plan for everyone with 50 credits every single month. So still 600 credits a year, or 600 pages a year that you can process with text recognition for free. So here we're really trying to provide as much value as possible for free. Yeah, because our mission is to provide the best tools. These tools cost some money to develop, but also are really helpful when you're working with historical documents. We take care of the technical part. We take care of the part where it comes to the fun work, when it comes to working with the material, analyzing the material, getting out those stories that are still uncovered in all of these historical documents. We also have a scholarship program where we, as we are coming from the academia, trying to support as many aspiring researchers and teachers as possible. So if you're interested, just look up for a scholarship program. And you can apply for it for your thesis or project. that you might be working on. And as promised at the beginning, we also have good news today. We have just today released a new supermodel. So those very good out-of-the-box models for Spanish. There will be more models coming up in the next week. So until Christmas, you might expect more of the supermodels coming up for very common languages, but in the longer run also for languages that are not that widely used. But in the next weeks, we might have some new supermodels for German, French, English, Italian. So make sure you look out for them. For now, we started with Spanish. That was our first test. It's called the Spanish Sage. So a very wise model that will help you uncover Spanish. So yeah, Santa Claus is coming, David. We are really trying to have before Christmas a couple of these new supermodels available. As always, if you have questions, we are here for you, as with these webinars, but also with our help center and also with our user success team and customer success team. So we're really trying to be here for you, try to solve your problems also on individual basis. Sometimes please bear with us. We are having close to 1,000 tickets sometimes per month. So entering all of those tickets takes some time and effort, but still we are really happy to get all of your questions and see how you're doing great when using Transkribus. And we also have a lot of these webinars where we try to answer the most pressing questions and the most common issues during a very condensed session, where we try to prepare as well as possible for the webinar and then present you how you can make the best out of Transkribus. The next one will be an Italian one on the end of November. On the 28th of November, we will have an Italian webinar. So if you're Italian speaking and want to start from scratch, or you might have some colleagues that want to start from scratch, this might be the webinar for you. And then we have one about the document editor and also about the new feature, or basically a revived feature, which is text to image matching, where you can import existing transcriptions into Transkribus. Now it's time for questions. I briefly before in the chat, I had a look at some. I replied to some that I will answer them directly here because some were very similar. One or a couple of them were about the material and the quality of the material. So if there's deteriorated material that you have scanned, and with historical material, it's just logic that not all of the material could have been preserved perfectly. Sometimes there's some erosion or some water leakages or dust that is come into play. With that in mind, our experience is that even though a lot of very, let's say bad material was processed with Transkribus, when you train a custom model, these models are doing actually sometimes better than we as a human could do. So if you have blurred images or dirty images or other, not ideal conditions of your material, you might still be able to train a relatively good model because the model actually learns to handle that circumstances and those for us as humans, not perfect conditions, but for the model it's just normal that what you have been able to mark as this text line is the text line it learns, and then it can also handle that material that is not in the best shape. So with material that has some issues regarding the quality, you might still be able to produce quite a decent model. There was also one question about negatives. I would assume that you should invert your negatives because the models technically perform a binarization. So basically the images, you can switch that off. That's an even more advanced setting, which could be available at the moment. It's not in the web platform. That's another topic. But when binarization is performed and you have inverted images, that might cause some trouble. So for the model, it's easier if you have images that are in the correct color scheme. Might there be some other questions that we can directly try to answer? I'm just having a quick look chat. Yeah, there was one question. Yeah.
Sorry.
Please go ahead, Ellen.
There was one question about training data or training a model for pages that are not as clean or maybe have notes. I think the question is, or the way it was phrased, with floating text between the lines and less straight lines, and how you would train a model for that.
That's also certainly one of the bigger challenges. But here, as explained at the beginning, here the major challenge is layout. The text might be solvable because technically what's happening when a text recognition and also model training is performed, we're working at line basis. So before the model learns to recognize that page, at least for the standard models we're talking about today, so models that can be trained, it's actually cropping out every single line, and every single line goes into the model training. And later on, when the model is used, same happens with the pages that are recognized. Every single line is first detected on the entire page by some layout analysis model. So the baselines are found on the page and then cropped out. And then it goes into the text recognition model. So if you solve the first problem, which is actually finding where the lines are, cropping them out is then something that is just done based on the polygons that we have heard before. And then it goes into the model. So the major challenge is actually the layout analysis in that regard. So solving that you might consider training a custom baseline model. Sometimes even that is proves to be tricky. But mainly you need to focus on layout with that type of material. Yeah, as said, try to train a baseline model. You might also, there's also an option for field models where you can train a field model on polygons. So there the baseline is basically not playing a role, because technically the baseline is irrelevant. The baseline is nothing else than a helper tool for users to say, here's the line, or to define where the line is on the image. And then there's an algorithm basically which turns that line that is on the image into the polygon, because the polygon is what defines what goes into the model. So cropping out that line and every single ligature and basically part of the text, that's then performed by the baseline to polygon mechanism. So there's a lot of errors that can actually happen in these very steps. That is also why layout is more complex. Once you have clean polygons, you will have no hard time to training our text model for them. So that's actually one of the biggest challenges. Maybe you want to add something, Sarah, because you're also experienced with that, also with training baseline models. But yeah, these are the greatest challenges.
No, I don't have anything to add.
Perfect. Just see if there's another question. Training models for old newspapers for several models. Similar problem. Here the baselines might not be that tricky because printed material sometimes is easier. But here you have another problem, which is then even one step before you need to know where those lines are, you need to know where the blocks of text are. If you have a lot of columns in your newspaper, for instance, and articles, to make it even more complex, you need to have a model that recognizes that well. Here with field models, you can really quickly train a model to do that recognition step. So recognize those columns if you want to recognize one column in one go. But you could even go one step farther and really define every single article in your newspaper as one block, and then train a model to recognize those blocks. In the next step, you recognize the baselines, and in the third step, you recognize the text. So it's actually, the more complex the layout, the trickier it will be to get out good recognition results. There, from a technical perspective, we always tend to say that text is the most solved problem from an AI perspective, at least in our platform, when it comes to training models and training good models. But the layout always proves to be more tricky. Question about two different languages. Technically, that's perfectly possible. So if you want to train a model for two different languages, it comes down to the amount of training data. If they are very different in terms of characters, might be a little bit more trickier. What you could do depends on the material. If it's really material where the the languages are mixed in the very same line, then you might have a hard time. What you could do is just train two models, one for German, one for Greek, for instance. If the material proves to have a layout where you can distinctively, or distinguish between the German part on the layout or on the page and the Greek part of the layout. Let's see if there is another question unanswered. Yeah, you're faster than I can read. Many of those questions have already been answered. The accuracy comparison tool will also be part of the web app. So that was a question that is maybe answered quicker. That's a very helpful tool also to really evaluate your model on a more methodological basis, where you can really run an evaluation on specific pages for your model. So you basically recognize material with your model, correct material manually, or basically to have perfectly transcribed data, and then you compare these two versions, and based on that you can compare or can compute a character rate on these very specific pages. You can see there is one answer question. Yeah, it means controlling the polygons is always necessary. It's advisable. So don't get us wrong. In most of the cases, so let's say 90% of the cases, polygons are perfectly fine. It's really when you have complex material and material where lines are not perfectly straight, warped, slanted, rotated, whatever. Also in that case, if the baseline is correct, the polygon might still look okay. But very often the baseline itself is the problem. So recognizing where the entire polygon should be. So yeah, but looking for the polygons, so if they look correctly, that's a very important step before training models. That being said, I think we are 17 minutes over what we had actually planned. I think you can tell that we all like doing what we do every day, building the platform that we are building all together, also together with you. That's also why I said it's always great to get your feedback, because we're really trying to have a really close a connection to the community and incorporate all of your feedback as quickly as possible. Of course, our team is still very small, so we're not able to be as quick as we would like to be. But it's great to collaborate so closely together with everyone in a cooperative. That's the major purpose of it. So yeah, we can just end this webinar by saying keep unlocking the past. So together, because we're here to unlock the past together with all of you. And have a nice evening or morning, depending on where you are, maybe even night. It's great to have you all here. And that so many still stayed, since we are overrunning quite a bit today.